Hey guys, I want to talk to you about Crowdtangle today, essentially what it is and how do I use it. So the first question, what is it? It's a social media analysis platform that allows you to dive into the rich amounts of data from each platform and see what content is capturing your audiences, in what form, how your content is performing relative to your competitors, how your content is performing over time, and I said the two main use cases for Crowdtangle, maybe say three main use cases include one, long-term vision. So setting your KPIs, you have a look at the intelligence. So what's my interaction rate now? What's my followers at now? What's my post count, video views? What is realistic in 1 month time? What's my stretch goals? What are my KPIs going to be? Same thing for 3 months time. So that's one use case, determining realistic KPIs. Second use case is seeing what's trending. You have a really good idea and quick idea of seeing what's trending in terms of your relative Facebook pages that you like to look at for inspiration for your own content. And then I said three, definitely the most underrated and the most underutilized aspect of Crowdtangle is developing your digital content strategy based upon the data insights of your top 10, lowest 10 articles within a set amount of time. I usually do a month, and seeing what does my audience really like. Do they really like photos, videos, posts, links? And what do they like it about? Do they like knowing about cricket? Do they like knowing about news? Do they like knowing about Triple M rock? What don't they like knowing about? Do they not like knowing about music? Getting a really good data-driven insight into what your audience is actually interested in. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to run you through a few of the quick main use cases, and we'll start from the easiest to the most difficult in terms of understanding and some of the more common things. So I'm just going to dive right in. The first thing that we're going to cover today is the Crowdtangle intelligence. So intelligence is the button just down here, and this is how you determine your long-term KPIs. It's a benchmarking system. It's pretty simple. I'm going to use Batuta Advocate as my example because I think they do a really great job, and I'm also going to use BuzzFeed Australia. So these guys contrast in a few ways. So what I'm going to talk you through is I'm going to talk you through a case study, Batuta versus BuzzFeed, and just how Crowdtangle shows us this data. So the first thing, so we've got interactions, video views, we've got all of these things. So I want to go to page likes first of all. And what we can see is, let's change this to the last 12 months in the date range. What we essentially can see is that BuzzFeed has 2.5 million audience. It's huge. And Batuta Advocate has 469,000. But interestingly, right, if we have a look at the data, in 1 year alone, the Batuta Advocate has doubled, over doubled their Facebook likes on their page. And in that same time period, BuzzFeed's only increased by about 10% of itself. So this is a really great way of identifying great up-and-coming Facebook pages and looking at content creators that do a really great job in growing their audience organically. And Batuta Advocate's a fantastic example for that. If we look at post count, I'd say this is more of a vanity measure. So if we look 213 versus 788, especially considering the new Facebook algorithm changes, it's definitely quality, not quantity. So I'd say BuzzFeed is nearly disadvantaged in this aspect. But probably the most important aspect of this intelligence feature, I would say, is interaction rate. So if we compare the interaction rates, it's quite stark. So the average interaction rate of BuzzFeed is 0.09%, and the Batuta Advocate is 1.89%. So I'll let you do the math, but essentially the Batuta Advocate overperforms the BuzzFeed Australia by 20 times on every single post. So it's, as you can tell, the intelligence feature on Crowdtangle. It's a great way of easily comparing your social media pages to really high performing pages as well as your competitors. And as well as that, you can enter in up to 10 different Facebook pages in this intelligence feature. Video views is kind of nice as well. You get a good idea of who's making more video content. So Batuta Advocate's on 28, they've done 668. So clearly BuzzFeed have more of a video strategy. And then interactions. So this is total interactions. So out of the intelligence feature, if I was going to be writing up my KPIs, I would be looking at total interactions. I would be looking at interaction rate, and I would be looking at page likes. I think that's a really important thing. And then it's a little tidbit as well. If you have a look at the interaction rate of Batuta Advocate, and almost all they do is links, they're at 1.89%. So it really does show that if you're creating the right content, disparaging the medium, you are going to really get great success on social media, and Batuta is a great example of that. So that's kind of the intelligence feature. I usually play around with 12 months. The date range is quite useful. You can play around with this stuff, but you have to have a reason behind it. So I'd normally keep it as all posts, last 12 months, and then that's how I'd normally track all of my KPIs. So that's the Crowdtangle intelligence feature in a nutshell. So I want to go back to Crowdtangle, and I want to show you another use case. So what I might do here is I'm going to jump down to Crowdtangle works off lists. Essentially, I might just create one now just to show you guys how it works. So if I was working for the Batuta Advocate, what I would be doing is I would create a Batuta Advocate trial page. I'd save that name. And then I would add a series of pages that kind of relate to me that I could then satirize their content. So I'm going to add that there, Sydney Morning Herald, and add the Guardian. And this is a good measure. I'm going to add, no, that should be enough, just to show you the purpose. So what I would then do is I would click on posts, and I would see what's performing really well, what's trending in the last 12 hours, say. And I want to see what my audience wants to see satirical content about. So if I'm having a quick look at this, I know exactly what's trending in my target audience. I know Barnaby Joyce, anything Barnaby Joyce related is going to be fantastic. I'm going to do 2 or 3 articles on Barnaby Joyce. So this is a great way to kind of get inspiration for your own content. So this is your second use case. This is using Crowdtangle to find trending topics that are super relevant to your audience. So rather than like reading the Sydney Daily Telegraph and finding, oh, what do I think is good, just go straight to the source here and you'll find out exactly what your audience is interacting with. If we look at again, teaching on the road to hell, maybe I'll do a satirical piece about teachers. That's clearly important for my audience. And that's the kind of way you kind of get inspiration through trending. So that's your second use case. And I would spend a lot of time kind of building out a really, really strong list full of all of the pages that I really like. So if I was going to spend the real time to do it, I would add everything. I would add Wall Street Journal. I'd add all kinds of things that relate directly to my audience. So I think that's a pretty good example of how you can use Crowdtangle to get trending data. And then the third use case, this is where it gets a little bit complex. So this is, I'm the Batuta Advocate, and I want to look at what am I doing? What do my audience really love from me in the last 30 days? What are they really enjoying in terms of my content? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially create a list. I'm then going to export all the data as a CSV. I'm then going to format that data properly. And then I'm going to analyze the top maybe 15 posts, the bottom 15 posts, see what's working really well, what's not working well at all, and then kind of form a data-driven content strategy for the Batuta Advocate off what I've learned from Crowdtangle. So it's a really important piece, this one. It'll take about 15 minutes to explain, but I definitely would say stick with me. So let's get started. So I'm going to use the same trial. So I'm going to remove from list. I'm going to remove the pages I just added, and I'm going to do the Batuta Advocate. So I'll show you how this works. Oops. So I'm going to add the page. Batuta Advocate. Perfect. There we go. And just as an FYI, the Batuta Advocate is an example of a really high performing publisher. So we're going to see uncharacteristically high interaction rates. One of the important things, I'm just going to change this to 30 days so we get a good idea, get a good amount of posts. So there's one thing I want to talk about briefly before we dive in, and that's interaction rate. So I want to quickly explain it. So an interaction rate is how many followers do you have on your Facebook page versus how many of those followers, so what percentage of your total follower base engaged with that actual post. So it's not the intuitive thing that your interaction rate is all of the people that saw that particular post and then engaged. It's actually all of the people on my particular page who then engaged. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, give it a quick Google and you'll find out how Facebook measures that. So what I'm going to do is I've got the last 30 days up. What does this mean? The 6.3 times. So this is the relative score. So what that tells me is that this post in particular performed 6 times better than the average Batuta Advocate post. So what I can do if I'd like, I can change it from overperforming to interaction rate. And that'll tell me a totally different set of numbers, so 7.27%. So that's how many people interacted with that post compared to my total follower base. So if I was going to compare several Facebook pages, I would absolutely, definitely change it, the filtering system from overperforming to interaction rate, because the interaction rate is independent of the posts themselves. Sorry, it's independent of the page that post came from. So it means that I can compare apples to oranges, if that makes sense. Because the overperforming feature is fantastic for comparing Batuta Advocate posts to Batuta Advocate posts, but it's not great at comparing Batuta Advocate posts to BuzzFeed Australia posts, because we know that the average interaction rate is 1.89% on Batuta Advocate and only 0.09% on BuzzFeed Australia. So clearly the relative performance metric will not be useful whatsoever. So I'm going to go back to overperforming. I'm going to click that. And I'm just going to refresh. Sometimes Crowdtangle have problems, but that's all right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export, well, okay, I can save the default. I'm actually going to download that as a CSV. So as you can tell, I've got a nice little CSV down here, and I'm going to open it. All right, lovely. So first of all, we get a ton of data, and it's quite confusing and intimidating. So I'm going just to delete everything that I don't need. So created date, time zone, I don't want that, so I'm going to delete it. Post URL. Post URL I want because I want to see where each Facebook post has come from. So that's actually quite useful for myself. Page name, I just like to leave it there so I know what I'm working with. Message and title. So I generally keep these because what I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to insert. Yeah, beautiful. I'm going to insert a column, and this column is going to be what type of content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually look at the messages and the titles and I'm going to open the URLs. I'm going to classify what type of content each of these posts were. So say, I'm just going to make it all one color and bright so everyone gets like a stand out. And I'm going to delete all the other columns I don't need. So what we're doing here is just some like nice data practices. We're just keeping everything really concentrated and really together. So link URL, I don't really need to know it, so I'm going to delete it. It's best just to get rid of everything so you know exactly what you're looking at. Perfect score. So because I've got the score for the relative performance indicator, I don't need likes, love, wow, haha, sad, angry. All I want to know is what's interacting really well with my audience. So I'm going to delete absolutely everything else. So all of a sudden, we have a really simple Excel spreadsheet that's easy to manage. So now that we have that, I'm just going to go like this, close it a little bit. So there's a few things we can do from here. So the first thing, and it's a pretty common thing, is let's go like this. So for most pages that aren't the Batuta Advocate, what I would do is I would create a pivot table. So let me see that now. Sorry. So what I will do, is I will click on anything within this big table, and I will click Control A, and that selects everything. And then from there, I will then make it a pivot table. So now, what I would do that for, I'm just going to manipulate a little bit of this data so it tells us an actual story. So photo. Cool. So now what I want to do is I want to see what's working well for this Facebook page. Is links working really well? A photo's working better? A video's working better? What's the best medium for me to engage with my audience? So that's actually one of the most invaluable things you can do. And then what I normally like to do, I know you can do this within Crowdtangle itself, but I'll normally just go like this. And I'll go, all right, cool. So I'll go, that's equals average. It's sum actually. The sum. See how good my Excel is. No, it's average. Or I prefer this one, median. Cool. So what I wanted to find out there is, so the median relative score of this post is 1.02. So that's pretty handy. And I'll do the same thing now for video. So that one's quite simple. I know it's 1.01. And then I'm going to do link. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go equals, I'm going to go median, and I'm going to go all the way down. I'm going to pick that. Cool. So I know the median link post is 1.68. So hypothetically in this scenario, I know that links are performing the best for my audience, and strategically I might want to do more link-based content in the future. I would then think about how long does links take me to make compared to photos and videos. What am I getting the best bang for my buck, and kind of making a strategic decision based on that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reset everything. And I'm going to look at the best performing 10 posts. So I'm going to go, oops. So I'm opening this one, the first one, what was that? So it's Kim Jong-un defeats Federer. So I can do the same thing here. So I might just have a quick look in Batuta Advocate. So let me explain that quickly. So all of the pages there are exactly the same as the pages here. So they're all in the same hierarchical order because they're all coming from top to bottom in terms of interaction rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label each piece of content. So the first one, this Kim Jong-un piece of content, I'd probably say Kim Jong-un tennis piss take. I'm going to go Rhonda, Amy advertisement reference with divorce satire. Relatable life moment of family. Piss take of mum. Piss take of parents, we'll do that. So another relatable life moment of family. There's a dog, as long as we get pets. So another one, relatable, and taking the piss out of a friend. That took me a while to get. What's that one? Tell one brother is the earth from the sun. That was hard to so that's probably a political piss take of major figure. Plus sex reference. That's quite good. That was another one. Relatable life moment of family piss take. That's another one. So as you can tell, what tends to happen here is we start to see a little bit of a pattern in terms of what's performing really well. Relatable, your reference, family, events, it's kind of, sort of. About myself. It's another one. And you can kind of go on forever, but what I normally do is I'd normally do maybe the top 10 posts. And I've kind of got a really good idea, like a data-driven idea of what's performing really well, just by categorizing, by spending the time sitting down and saying this type of content is performing really well for the tutor. So if we have a look at this, we know that global news interacted with local news in terms of the Kim Jong-un thing works really well. Pop culture references to old advertisements work. But kind of the most trial and error, the fail-safe one, is relatable life moments about family and friends. That's kind of the big winners of Batuta. If you want to get really into it, you could then look at that. You could do the whole thing and see what they do most of, and then statistically what's more likely or less likely to get in. This is kind of a shortcut way of getting you a good idea of what type of content's working. Crypto investor is probably the next one. That's a classic. Anyway, so now the same thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do underperforming here. So I'm going to export another CSV. And I'm going to see, it's probably one of the most interesting ones. It's what should Batuta Advocate do less of? And that's also a great question, because by doing one thing, you're taking away resources from doing another. So let's do this one a little bit more quickly. Just delete everything we don't need. So this is probably a poor example because Batuta Advocate does so many things well and they really know their own brand. But if you kind of have a more muddied brand that does memes, they then do music content, they then do celebrity, pops, news, having a look at the data behind the actual content choices, it's a really invaluable step in making your content the best that it can be. So let's create another. Let's insert something here. Alright, what is the content? And one of the big reasons that I like to do all of my stuff in an Excel spreadsheet like this is it gives yourself some accountability if you're reporting to someone else, as well as you can very quickly, if someone says, oh, I don't remember number 8 being something about Kim Jong-un, you can say, oh, well, don't worry, let me just get the link for you, command, copy, paste, this was it. It's a really great way of kind of reminding yourself as well. So I definitely recommend this Excel spreadsheet format. Let's go back to my Excel spreadsheet. Where did it go? There it is. Ah, nice. So let's start doing this again. So I'm going to go back to the Southern Cross stereo. I'm just going to go through the feed like this. So first one, New Englander, pulling a calf. So niche political joke about rural country didn't go well. So look at the next few. Slightly confused and long Queensland origin joke. There's no one. So political Cooper's reference mixed with rural. So if I'm doing the content at the moment, I can pretty immediately tell that the clarity of my messaging is sort of a problem with my worst performing. Niche political joke missing clear punchline at someone's expense. Very specific. Weird white. So that was not even that bad. That's that one. It's called Alright, cool. So once we've done that for a while, we kind of have a good idea of what's not really working for someone like the Batuta advocate. So let's just highlight what they've done. So first of all, if I have a look, it's kind of like their problem is niche jokes about either very niche political or very niche aspects in someone's life. So I think it's just appealing to the broader appeal is what the content strategy for Batuta Advocate would be. And maybe going slightly away from the highly politicized stuff about rural country, and kind of going back to the big inner city stuff that kind of relates back. So where the population, where their audience is. If you were Batuta Advocate, you'd look at the Facebook audience insights to see where your audience is actually geographically located. So once we've done that, we can then, I'd probably go back here, and then I'd have a look at, like, what's my dead average stuff? Like, what are they doing? So I'll have a quick look at just the stuff that's like, this has got a relative performance metric of like 1. It's like just the really bread and butter stuff. Doesn't stand out. I just want to see how that's performing. So I think if you're having a quick look at these, you probably don't have to write it down, and you kind of just recognize yourself that the checkerboard fans meme, just really niche stuff. Dad splices up text message with a few pointless commas. This one probably doesn't happen that often. It's probably less relatable. And shirt passes sniff test for the 3rd time. It's kind of going back to the relatable about me rather than relatable about someone else. So if we're kind of going back to the beginnings, what have we actually learnt from this little exercise is we go back to our top 10 and we go, alright, cool, our audience quite likes localized piss takes of global figures. They quite like really well executed pop culture references from famous advertisements, and they really like relatable life moments of families and piss takes of that. And in special circumstances when they're really good, relatable life reference about themselves. So, and then what we've also learned is what not to do. So niche political jokes about rural country, niche political jokes, weird white dress jokes, things without really strong, clear punchlines and calls to action. So say, let's just pop this here. Let's say we were going to do a quick deck for these guys. So let's do our quick Batuta Advocate strategy. So let's just quickly pump one out. So what have we learned? As shown in February. Our audience loves figures So all of a sudden, we've kind of had a look at, we've broken down the data, we've got a really clear idea of what our top 10 posts have shown us. And all of a sudden, we kind of got a good direction for the Betoot advocate and where they want to go. The next thing, what we would do is we do the same thing, but we would do it. So for what not to do, and we do rural, political, niche jokes without directly at someone's expense. And that kind of speaks for itself. I can do the whole thing. And then maybe just like the common traps. Content falls in. And then looking at our kind of middle of the road posts, we know that the joke needs to be relevant enough to tag someone else. So if we look at like the shirt sniffing one, for example, that needs to be a bit more generic or a bit more broad or a different topic, so that I can tag my friend and be like, that's so me or that's so you. Because it's not really at anyone's expense, it's also kind of muddied and confusing. Same thing, like the joke needs a clear punchline. And I'd say if we look back at the top 10 posts, the joke needs to be directly at someone's expense. If we look at the Australian audience, we know that Australians are quite self-deprecating and they quite like that kind of humour style. So this is probably a nice framework for the Betoot advocate. So let's just save that. I'll do that later. Alright, cool. So all of a sudden, we've gone on a little journey, we found out a little bit about Crowdtangle, and within maybe half an hour, we've got a really solid data-driven strategy that I could now show myself at the start of every day and go, all right, what do I want to do? And I'll go, well, I need to remember the top 10 posts from last month. And I can do this every month and kind of analyze what the trends are with my audience and where they're going, and just be really strategic about how I'm spending time on writing content. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And as well as that, I should mention Crowdtangle, I think it's just limited to media publishers at the moment. So you do have to know someone or work in a major media publisher to get access to it. But it is a really fantastic tool when used in the right scenarios. So yeah, thanks for sticking with me, and all the best with all of your social media analysis. Thanks.